What's up, everybody, and welcome back in. Today, during the Chad Daybell trial, we talked more about upstairs, downstairs. Was the house a one-story house, two-story house? Did the state prove John Pryor was misrepresenting things about the house to a prior witness? What does the jury think about him because of that? And then we get some very, very specific dot connecting from Melanie, Lori Vallow's niece, about what Chad Daybell's role was in all of this. What was his relationship like with Lori's family, including her, including Alex Cox and other co-conspirators. The state is methodically going through this case, and we're going to point out and highlight some of the most important evidence from today. So make sure you guys hit that like button and make sure you subscribe to our channel. Let's get into it. So we're going to start out with Agent Daniels on the stand, who was there doing the search, and he testified a lot about where the bodies were found, how they found them, where the human remains were, obviously connecting to Chad Daybell on his property. But the part I want to play is the state asking some questions about a second-story window. And then we're going to play a little bit of cross-examination from John Pryor, who starts to try to pick that apart because he knows how important it is to keep your credibility with the jury if you're a criminal defense attorney, especially if you've got some gray areas you're picking and prodding at and chipping away at the state's case and trying to point the finger in other directions, maybe some smoke and mirrors, maybe some misdirection. But once the jury thinks you're lying to them or trying to pull the wool over their eyes, you could lose all of that. And then they just start believing what the state says, and nothing you argue or say is going to matter because they're not going to trust what you say anymore. And as a lawyer, that's kind of a poison pill. So we'll see how he tries to fight back and chip away at it. But this agent is pretty firm in his stance. And while it took some time, and the state's done it with other witnesses as well, I think it's pretty confirmed at this point, there was an upstairs and a downstairs, but I liked the way that this witness specifically explained how that setup was and how he dealt with Pryor's cross. So first the state and some discussion about the second story
of the property. And from this photograph, we're looking back towards the residence. And in the photograph, you can see the second story bedroom window. I'm pointing out with the laser up there. And in the very beginning, last Friday, we showed you a vantage point photograph. And one of those vantage point photographs was from that second story window that's in that picture. So right above that back door. And so there's a rear man door that comes out of the residence also. So that's the Chad Daybell residence. That's the upper story second bedroom window. And then we're going to be walking towards this large tree. And near the base of that tree is going to be J.J. Vallow's burial site. And so this is an overall photo as is. So as it looked when we were there. And we're just walking towards the burial, so what becomes the burial site. And this just gives you a good idea of how the taller vegetation or the taller grass as we're going that way. And that'll become important as we get closer.
And Your Honor, this has been marked as State's Exhibit 1.
So very clear. He says second story bedroom window, and he calls it a bedroom. And where you can see where this is and connecting the dots about how maybe this is something Chad Daybell said. But let's jump ahead now to cross and see how he deals with this.
Are you aware that the structure, the second floor and the view?
My logs and records, my notes.
Okay. And it's interesting that throughout your testimony in the last day or two, you didn't make reference of having to review your notes or logs about this case. Do you find it unusual that you have to review your notes and logs as part of a cadaver dog search of two apartments that were relevant to this case?
No, I knew I was going to be speaking about this search. So I reviewed my notes and logs and records for this Daybell property we were speaking of. I didn't know I'd be talking about the search warrants of the apartments, so I didn't review those prior to coming. And I've conducted many searches in the last 4 or so years.
Okay. Now you talked a little bit about the second floor and the view from the second floor of the Daybell residence. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Have you been in that house?
Yes.
Okay.
So he's been in it. Okay. So we have somebody that actually has been in it. One of the things that's interesting, and you guys have commented on it, John Pryor likes to look at the jury while he's questioning witnesses, while he's talking. He's looking at their reactions, maybe even trying to get a reaction out of them. How he's looking over at them and then looking back at the witness and not locking eyes with the jury, to me, and he's highlighting here this factor of upstairs, downstairs, 2 stories. I kind of am willing to bet this jury is starting to side-eye John Pryor a little bit. And what seemed like a big point, a big hammer, a big win for him, when he says, "Are you aware of this 1-story house?" To the witness that testified that Chad Daybell at Tammy's viewing said he went upstairs or she went downstairs, whatever it may have been. Made that witness's credibility shot. But are the roles being reversed here? and is in fact John Pryor's credibility getting shot with this witness saying there was a second story, second floor bedroom where somebody could have easily gone to bed, went up to bed, come down from the room. So let's hear how John Pryor tries to attack it, because I think he believes this is important. And I agree with him. If that cross-examination hit the way it felt like it hit to me watching, this is important for him to battle back and try to gain some credibility back with the jury. Let's see how he does.
Are you aware that the so-called second floor is an attachment to the garage?
Yes.
Are you aware that when you leave the main residence,
The so-called second floor is attached to the garage. And now he's saying you have to leave the main residence to get there.
the so-called second floor is an attachment to the garage?
Yes.
Are you aware that when you leave the main residence, you have to go in the garage and then further go through another entranceway to go up a set of stairs to get into that attached structure to the garage?
Objection. Counsel is testifying. Move to strike from record.
Sustained. Are you aware that the structure is an attachment to the garage? You've already testified that's correct?
Correct.
And you're aware that to gain entry to that attached structure to the garage, you have to leave the main residence. Are you aware of that?
Same objection.
Yes.
And you don't have any knowledge personally of what that attached structure to the garage is used for, do you?
In that
Well, it's funny you should ask, because he got some context clues. And again, him saying it's an attached structure that you have to leave the residence to go there. You tell me in the comments. Who do you feel is more credible? The witness that said, I don't know, I've never been there, she said upstairs, or Chad said upstairs, or John Pryor saying it's a one-story building, and then now we have multiple people testifying there was a second story to an attached structure, but now John Pryor trying to make it seem like we have the residence in the house, and then we have this other place you can go that has a second story. Who do you find more credible? And most importantly, is it now more or less likely that Chad Daybell could have said somebody walked upstairs or downstairs in their house, or that somebody could have left talking to Chad Daybell and walked upstairs to go to bed? But what was that room used for, and how does this agent know?
second story bedroom, there was a
That attached structure to the garage is used for, do you?
in that second story bedroom, there was a mattress on the floor. And on June 9th, there was a comforter and
Okay.
it was opened and there were pillows there as if somebody had been
Okay.
sleeping in it.
Yikes. You asked that open-ended question, and a good witness like this guy is going to say, well, funny you should ask. There was a mattress on the floor of the bedroom. Oh, not only was there a mattress on the floor, but there was a comforter. Oh, not only was there a comforter, but it was laid open. Oh, not only was there an open comforter, but there were pillows. And all of that leads me to believe somebody had been sleeping there. Now, Pryor has a response, so we're going to listen to it, but that's not good for him.
That's why I call it a bedroom.
Are you aware of
And you can tell he starts looking down at his notes and making notes, not making as much eye contact with the jury.
who was residing in the residence at the time of September of 2019?
I am not.
Okay. Are you aware who was residing in that residence as of June of 2020?
I am not.
As far as the pictures are concerned of the garage, do you know who took those pictures?
I do.
Who took them?
ERT member Rachel Wright.
And that's a member of your staff, is that right?
She's an ERT member, correct?
Now, in the beginning, you had mentioned that you were
I
stating
think that was most of the gist with the first floor, second floor. Again, less eye contact with the jury, more looking down at his notes. And so he was trying to set up that maybe somebody else was staying at their house and using that second floor room as a bedroom with an extra mattress, but that it's not an actual bedroom, or it's specifically not Chad and Tammy's bedroom. And I think he can have Chad's kids testify to that fact, and that they always slept in their bedroom, which was in the one-story portion of the house. So I think we're going to hear them continue to quibble about this first story, second story. But from my perspective, it absolutely sounded like John Pryor dropped the hammer that it's a one-story house. So this witness has no clue what she's talking about. That is no longer the case. It was absolutely not a kill shot type of question, so much that it sounded like that, as multiple witnesses have testified. There's an upstairs and a downstairs in the residence, and we can quibble about the definition of residence. And this guy is now saying it's a bedroom and giving a pretty good example why he would call it a bedroom. So then we get to, in my opinion, the most important witness of the day, which is Melanie Pulowski, Lori Vallow's niece. So let's jump ahead to that. And we're going to start out by listening to her explain the relationship between herself and Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow and how close she was, how potentially susceptible she was to their teaching, what they taught her, and specifically connecting the dots between Chad, Lori, Alex, light, dark, zombies, death, plans, all sorts of things. Then we also hear recordings later on with them talking about this. Well, I have to check because Chad says things like, well, I have to check because, there's bad things happening here and there, and it's going to get so bad, people hurting each other and all sorts of chaos. And I mean, he had these visions, and like you hear this from his own mouth. You hear him say these weird things, but you hear John Pryor kind of telling a different story in that these weren't that weird of teachings. Lots of people believe this stuff, and he was manipulated by Lori, and he was scared of Alex. So we got to get through that if we're the state, right? And the state has to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. Well, I think Melanie did a really good job helping the state kind of push through that BS, potentially, of how Chad was manipulated. He was scared of Alex, and Alex and Lori did this, and Chad had nothing to do with it. Very hard to believe when you start to hear how their relationship was and how other people in their lives and in their very close family saw them. That's why these witnesses are very important. And the state, when you plan a case like this as a trial lawyer, you figure out when people need to come in and answer certain questions. And it's almost good if the defense can fire all their shots so you know exactly what their defense is and the jury's starting to pick up on it. And then boom, you can really hammer away at their defense.
Them that shared those things with you? Both. And when you say both, at times, were they both together when they shared those with you?
Both together and separate.
So at times just Lori would share them,
Yes.
and at times just Chad would share them. Is that fair?
I don't know if I remember a time where it was just Chad. I do remember them being together and then with just Lori.
And with what Lori was teaching you, do you know where those ideas were originating from?
I believe they came from Chad.
Do you recall what they taught you or told you in relation to light and dark?
I
From
think I just
what I
missed-
remember,
let me back up a little.
Sharing teachings with you, or
it would be mostly through,
and when you met, do you recall approximately when you met Chad?
I believe, in November of 2018.
Did you continue to interact with Chad from that point on?
Through Lori.
So when you say through Lori, would you communicate with Chad through Lori?
She would say, Chad said to tell you this, or it would be mostly through Lori for the most part.
Would you also send messages to Chad through Lori?
Yes.
Did that include you asking Chad for guidance or advice?
Yes.
Would you say at some point you developed a close relationship with Chad?
Yes.
At some point, did you eventually begin referring to him as dad?
Yes.
Okay. So she would communicate at first with Lori and then with Chad via Lori. She developed a close relationship with him. She trusted him. She asked him for advice. They got so close that she was literally calling him dad. That's big and that's important. This is somebody who loved Chad Daybell, who trusted him, who learned from him, and now is going to connect the dots against him.
At some point, did Lori and Chad begin sharing teachings with you or their purported beliefs?
Yes.
Do you recall them sharing some teachings regarding light and dark?
Yes.
Do you recall which one of them, or if it was both of them that shared those things with you?
Both.
And when you say both, at times, were they both together when they shared those with you?
Both together and separate.
So at times just Lori would share them,
Yes.
and at times just Chad would share them. Is that fair?
I don't know if I remember a time where it was just Chad. I do remember them being together and then with just Lori.
And with what Lori was teaching you, do you know where those ideas were originating from?
I believe they came from Chad.
Do you recall what they taught you or told you in relation to light and dark?
From what I remember, Chad was said to have a gift to spiritually discern, and he could see light and dark, or if a person had good intentions.
Chad. Okay, here we go. These are the important dots. And I'm not saying she seems very credible. She's not pushing. She's not stretching. She's not trying to get him. It's not like she's coming in here saying like, I got the smoking gun against him. But since we know what their defense is, and then she's saying that Chad has this gift of spiritual discernment to figure out and tell us who's light and dark and know what people's intentions are. It's kind of cutting through all that and saying he is the manipulator. He is the leader. He's choosing who's light and dark. And that becomes important later when we get to redirect.
But that he could see through and had that gift.
And did you ever learn about him having some kind of a tool or something that he would use to help him discern light and dark?
Yes.
What did you learn about that?
That he had a pendant or like necklace something to that effect that he could, like a pendulum kind of thing, where he could get an answer to something he wanted to know.
And it looks like, and just for the record, it looks like you were making a swinging motion with your hand. Is that correct?
That's what I've seen from other people that will use like a tool or something like that, I think you swing it, and if it swings one way, it means yes or no. I'm not sure exactly.
And was it your understanding that Chad always had to use that tool to discern light and dark?
From what I remember being told is that he didn't always need that. It was just something extra he could use.
At some point, did Chad and Lori teach you about castings?
Yes.
So he didn't need the tool, okay? But it was something he would use. That's important too, because when you're running a scam and you say there's some objective way to do it, there's a problem with that, because then other people might be able to learn how to do it with that, swinging thing or the necklace. Or if you don't have the necklace, but you really need to point somebody out as the bad guy, dark, bad intentions, we need to get him, zombies. And if you don't have that necklace, well, then you're in trouble. So what do? You leave a caveat that I don't always need it. I know, but that thing just helps me. And he had that. They talk about castings. They talk about, how you do it and vibrations and all of those kind of things. But there's more talk about light and dark, and specifically zombies, that I also thought was very important.
At some point, did Chad or Lori talk to you about the Church of the Firstborn?
Yes.
What, if anything, did they indicate in relation to Chad's role with the Church of the Firstborn?
That Chad believed he was to help organize and learn more about the Church of the Firstborn.
Organize the Church of the Firstborn basically means he's king and he's the decision maker of who's coming and who's not.
Did Chad and Lori ever share with you what they believed their mission in this world to be?
I believe it was to help with the second coming of Jesus Christ.
And we talked about the dark and light and you turning to Chad for advice. Were those some of the things that you would ask Chad if someone was dark or light?
Yes.
At some point, did you learn a different term for people that were possessed?
Yes.
And what was that term?
Zombie.
Do you recall who introduced that term to you?
I believe it was Lori.
At some point, did Chad or Lori also talk to you about what it meant if someone was possessed or became a zombie, where the actual person would go?
Yes.
What did you learn in regards to that?
So that there was some type of darkness that you couldn't cast out. And so if this, that the Lord in his due time would have to take, that person would pass away because this darkness was too much or something.
So light and dark, Chad knows how to do it. Zombie, Lori introduced her to that. Eventually, the darkness is so bad or so big or is there for so long that you can't cast it out. And so the Lord will take you out. And for Chad and Lori, they just so happen to take out all the obstacles in their way. Again, these dots are just falling together too seamlessly now about how Chad Daybell was the one controlling who was light and dark and telling people basically to expect these dark people to die. And don't look at them. Don't point the finger at them, because they told you. We've been saying this for years, that if you're dark, you're going to die because you can't get rid of the darkness. So why are you looking at us now? Why are you looking surprised? Who's getting in your ear? Who's convincing you otherwise? I mean, this is prototypical brainwashing. And her husband, Melanie's husband, testifies right after her. I think they're still married. I'm not positive. About how she was literally brainwashed by them. She trusted them. She looked up to them, and they manipulated her.
Something like that.
So if someone were to be possessed and with a strong enough entity, essentially the body would have to die.
Judge, that's leading, calls for speculation.
She does lead a ton here. The judge lets her get away with some of it. Prior objects to a lot of it, but she wants to hammer this home. That, the only way to fix some of this stuff, according to Chad, light and dark, according to Chad, was for the body to die.
That's a sustained on leading.
If someone became too dark, would the body have to die?
Judge, leading.
Overruled.
I believe so. That I think that was their idea, that they would pass away because they couldn't have this darkness inside them, or that it overtook them.
And do you know where that idea originated?
They couldn't have it inside it, or that it overtook them. Once again, these teachings, and so you manipulate, oh, now they're disagreeing with me, but the only reason they're disagreeing with me is because the darkness overtook them.
From or with who?
Judge, calls for speculation.
Overruled.
The zombie idea, or
The idea that the body would have to expire.
I'm not sure where it originated, but I believed it to be Chad.
That's rank speculation, but came in. So the jury heard it. she thinks it is coming from Chad that the body would have to expire because of the darkness.
At some point, did you have conversations with Chad and Lori about law enforcement?
Yes.
What did they tell you in relation to law enforcement?
They told me that law enforcement was corrupt and that they were after them and that they couldn't be trusted.
Well, isn't that convenient when you want people to lie to the cops or not talk to the cops or want to do things that are illegal? That's what the state's going to argue. When you know you're doing things that are illegal and you're going to do more things that are illegal and you don't want your inner circle talking to the cops, this is what you preach to them. This is what you want them to believe. It all is lining up. And this witness, Melanie, again, I don't feel like she's pressing or trying to hurt Chad or Lori. She's just telling what her life was like in that inner circle, what she was taught directly from the king and queen.
Did they tell you anything in relation to whether or not to speak with law enforcement?
Yes.
And what did they tell you?
They told me don't speak with law enforcement.
Judge, can I have some foundation
Overruled.
objection?
At some point, do you recall if specific law enforcement officers were identified as dark by Chad and Lori?
Yes.
Who were those officers?
Detective Aramasio and I want to say Detective Hope. Is that? I'm not sure if that's right. There was somebody who was related to Tammy's family, I think.
So just the ones that were investigating them, just the ones that were looking into them, just the ones that are going to build a case against them or related to the cases against them. Those were the dark ones. It's shocking how that happens.
And those are the two you specifically remember being named?
Yes.
At some point, did Chad, well, let me back up. Where were you living in November of 2018?
I moved up
Or
to
2019, excuse me, November 2019.
I moved up to Rexburg the first week in November of 2019.
Were you also living there in December of 2019?
Yes.
At some point, did you learn JJ and Tylee had been declared missing?
Yes.
Did Chad tell you anything in relation to where you should be living?
I remember that he said that Madison County wasn't safe and to wait until the whole thing blew over, but that I should move away out of that county for the time being.
And was this after the children had been deemed missing?
Yes.
Did you have occasion to observe Lori and Alex together?
Yes.
What did you observe?
All right. So now we're going to get to Alex Cox. And is she going to testify how scared Chad Daybell was? They never hung out because Cox had it out for Daybell because, you know, he was jealous or something of the time spent with Lori. What's her testimony going to be about this? As somebody who lived it. And we're going to hear more recordings later in the trial. We're not going to listen to all of them, but when her husband was on the stand, they listened to recordings. She's on them. Alex Cox's wife, Lori, Chad, everybody's all there. One big family. What's she going to say about Chad and Alex's relationship?
About their relationship?
That they, from what I could tell, just had a playful, fun sibling relationship, would help each other out as brother, sister.
Would Alex do what Lori asked?
I'm not sure everything she's asked him, but for the most part, he would help her if she needed his help with something.
Did you have an opportunity to observe Alex and Chad together?
Yes.
What did you observe about their relationship?
Alex admired Chad and looked up to him like a brother.
Well, that doesn't seem like somebody that wants to see if a bullet can go through your car when they show up. Doesn't seem like somebody you're scared of or that you would have to look out for because they might do something to you. Now, obviously, relationships can change. I get that. But he saw Chad as a brother and he looked up to him. Let's listen to that one more time.
About their relationship?
Alex admired Chad and looked up to him like a brother.
Would Alex do what Chad asked him to do?
Objection called for speculation.
I believe he had enough trust in Chad that he would listen to him.
Would Alex do what Chad wanted him to do? He had enough trust in him that he would believe him. Again, connecting the dots. Who's the manipulator? Who can sick the attack dog on somebody? Who can make the attack dog, and I don't mean to be demeaning to anybody by calling him an attack dog, but the protector, the enforcer. Who can sick the enforcer on somebody who's dark? Well, the person he looks up to and trusts, and of course, the person who determines whether or not somebody's dark, but not just that, somebody who has the tool to determine if somebody's dark, and not just that, but somebody who's able to determine whether they're too dark or too far gone or overwhelmed or consumed or controlled by the darkness that there's no way to fix it but for the body to expire. And who is that person? It's the person sitting at defense counsel table, Chad Daybell. This is really important stuff because it's not, again, it's not a smoking gun. It's not, I have a picture of him doing it, but it's all this stuff they're trying to make you feel or think through all these questions. No, I was there. And guess what? Her cross was very uneventful. Not a lot of holes poked. Not much he can do. And when asked if either side might be calling them again, John Pryor couldn't say no quick enough. That's also an indication of a good witness for the state.
And you talked about learning Alex stayed behind from Hawaii because Chad needed his help with something.
I believe that's what Lori said, that he was going to come with us, but ended up not working out.
So he was known to do things for Chad, including miss a trip to Hawaii.
When law enforcement were looking for the children, did you observe anything about how Alex seemed to feel about that or behave?
He seemed calm and normal, just collected his normal self. Like,
And did Alex tell you anything in relation to how Chad reacted to law enforcement getting involved?
I don't remember who told me, but
Chuck,
it was,
Jack calls for speculation. It's hearsay.
Sustained.
So if she would have said it was Alex or lawyer Chad, it would have come in as a hearsay exception for the defendant and co-conspirators. But because she said she doesn't remember who said it, that's why it was sustained. All right. So then cross, not that eventful. But what was incredibly eventful is a very short redirect. So let's go to that.
And when we talk about the light and dark, would you ask Lori to get the answers from Chad on that?
I don't know at all.
Sorry, I'm going to back it up a little. All right.
You
here
just
we go.
clarified that you believe Lori and Alex had separate apartments in Arizona, correct?
Yes.
When Lori moved to Hawaii in February or March of 2019, did Alex go with her?
I don't know.
To the best of your knowledge, did he move there?
I don't know at all.
When you talk about Alex going to Hawaii, that was for just a trip in October?
I don't remember talking about going to Hawaii with Alex. I just planned it with Lori.
And let me back up. On the trip that you heard Alex was intending to come, was that the October 2019 trip?
Yes.
And that was not to relocate, is that correct? It was just to visit?
To Hawaii?
Yes.
No, Lori said that he had told me he was going to join us, and then the plans changed.
And that was just a trip, though? You weren't going to remain in Hawaii?
Yes, Lori and I just planned it as a trip.
And when we talk about the light and dark, would you ask Lori to get the answers from Chad on that, if someone was light or dark?
Yes.
Again, everybody has basically said the light and dark originates with Chad. And why is that important? Why is that such an important dot to connect?
And did you ever learn anything in relation, and again, did you learn whether or not Charles was designated as dark?
Yes,
And was he designated as dark?
I believe so. Yes.
Is Charles still alive?
Here we go. Charles was designated as dark. So who was the one designating people as dark or light? Chad Daybell. Okay. Was Charles designated as dark? Yes. Okay. And we don't have to ask this next question, but designated by Chad as dark? Yes. And is he no longer alive? Yes. So he's dead because he's dark because Chad Daybell said he's dark.
Was JJ designated as dark?
I believe so. Yes.
Judge, this is going beyond the scope of cross.
Your Honor, is JJ still alive?
No.
Was Tylee labeled as dark?
Yes.
Is Tylee still alive?
No.
I have no further questions.
All right, thank you, Ms. White.
Now, she didn't go Tammy. She didn't go, other people that were labeled as dark and that are still alive, which John Pryor has done in some crosses. But that's pretty powerful. Charles, JJ, Tylee. Chad's the one that designates people dark. All three of them designated as dark. All three of them dead. All three of them stumbling blocks for Chad Daybell to be with Lori Vallow together forever in their mission and finding the 144,000 where he has all the power and people listen to him and he's a visionary and he has spiritual discernment and he is the one that everybody comes to with their questions in life. So to me, major dots connected by Melanie Pulowski, and her husband Ian also connects more dots, playing recordings where, Lori admits that they had Melanie Gibb lie to the police basically, and good luck if you're going to go tell them the truth now. There was also an interesting legal part of Ian Pulowski's testimony that I figured you guys would have questions on. And while we got some, quotables during the recorded statements of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell, saying things like, "We had no idea the police were infiltrated with such dark people," and Kane's translated followers and his dark disciples were here in Little Rexburg. Lots of interesting, weird things happening in the recordings, not so different than what we've already heard throughout the trial. But this to me was a very interesting part where the judge just kind of stops in the middle of cross, and the guy we're going to be talking about is sitting right behind John Pryor. You can't really see him. The Elmo's in the way as well, so you couldn't really see him on direct. But some accusations were made of Ian Pawlowski's personal counsel, his personal lawyer he had there at trial. And let's take a listen to what the arguments are, what the judge ends up doing, and whether or not it's appropriate to do this when somebody has counsel in the courtroom when they're on the stand.
Quick issue taken up outside the presence of the jurors. We're not going to take a break necessarily. If they could just line up outside the hall, this should be very quick, and then we'll go back on after I address that outside of the jurors' presence.
Yes. All right, please.
He sends the jury out just for a second, go out in the hallway. It won't take a minute. I shouldn't say the hallway, but they're going back into the jury room just for a minute because the hallway would be weird once you see what happens next.
All right, thank you. Please be seated. All right, counsel, the court was advised of something that concerned me during the testimony of this witness, nothing that you did, Mr. Pawlowski, but I do have a concern. Mr. Pawlowski has counsel here in the courtroom. The attorney that's here representing Mr. Pawlowski, I'm going to have him exit the courtroom at this time. If the marshals please assist him out of the courtroom, and he's not going to be permitted to remain through the testimony of this witness.
Pawlowski's attorney is being sent and actually escorted out of the courtroom and told he is not allowed to stay in for the remainder of the witness that he represents. And we're about to find out why. So literally, police escort out of the courtroom. Not good. And we're going to find out why here.
Mr. Pryor, if you want to briefly inquire on the issue we raised on the sidebar, you may do that outside of the presence of the jurors, just as to whether or not there was any potential influence of the witness's testimony.
Mr. Pawlowski,
The judge said whether there was any potential influence of the witness testimony.
the gentleman who was just escorted out of the courtroom, do you know who that is?
Yes, it's Garrett Smith.
That's who?
Garrett Smith.
He's an attorney
Yes,
and he's licensed in which state?
Arizona.
And at this point, Mr. Smith was listening to your testimony. Is that correct?
Yes.
And at some point during the testimony, Mr. Smith was nodding his head and acknowledging to you about responses to my questions. Is that in fact true?
No.
Okay.
All right, that concludes the inquiry then, and we'll go ahead and have the jurors return for additional cross-examination. So if everyone would rise for the jurors, we'll go ahead and have the jurors brought back in.
So the witness said no, that he wasn't influenced by anything he did. He didn't see him nodding his head or his lawyer nodding his head when Pryor was asking him questions. And that's all on the record. The witness is denying any influence. So why did the judge send him out of the courtroom? By the way, he does not allow him to come back in, even after the witness made those statements saying he wasn't influenced. Now, I'm just guessing, but to me, I would think the judge maybe did see the lawyer nodding his head, or at least John Pryor made a credible enough argument or complaint that this was happening. And so the judge didn't want to take any chances. The judge does not want something like this happening. Now, some judges may instruct the attorney sitting there, hey, don't do that. Make sure you're not doing that. Or if he wasn't sure or didn't see it, they'd give him the benefit of the doubt and instruct him not to. It's not what Judge Boyce did. Judge Boyce sent him out. So did Judge Boyce step on the rights of the witness, Ian Pawlowski? And the answer to that is no. He doesn't have an absolute right to counsel in a situation like this. He's not a criminal defendant being interrogated. He does have a right to have counsel with him until and unless counsel affects the proceedings, does something wrong, violates a court orders, violates a court rule, violates the rules of professional ethics, does something the court doesn't like. The court absolutely has discretion to send personal counsel out of a witness if he's affecting the trial, if he is influencing the witness. Every lawyer knows you're not allowed to do that. I'm not saying he did. I'm just saying, based on the context clues of what happens here, I think Judge Boyce at least thinks it's possible something was happening to where he doesn't want to take a chance where this attorney is going to influence this witness and influence or affect this trial or create an appellate issue. And it was brought to his attention, so he just nipped it in the bud right away. He's no nonsense. He's not taking any chances. He's not given any leeway at all. And I thought that was kind of just an interesting little thing that happened in court that is cool to explain, explore, see how it happens. And I know you guys would have questions on it, so I figured I'd dive into it for a second there. So this was really something today to me, just me personally. If I'm watching this as a juror, today's testimony is incredibly important, and I'm hit with it in the face as they talk about finding the burial sites on Chad Daybell's ground. There's just no real doubt in my mind that he was involved. What specifically actions did he take? I don't know. And they don't necessarily have to prove he's the one that, did X or Y, but that he was involved in the planning and the plotting. We've read through the indictment together. And I think the state is getting there. They're really getting there for me. Let me know if they're getting there for you in the comments. We'll continue to follow this. We'll continue to watch it. Make sure you guys hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to our page and let me know what your questions are so we can continue to answer them. Till next time, I am out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, The Lawyer You Know.